Highly recommended book club books for historical fiction lovers. Let's do it. I've got this giant list of the best book club books for historical fiction lovers that I published on my blog, but I want to dive deep into these and share with you why I think they're great for book clubs. So some of the themes that are represented in the books and a little bit about each book. Most of these would be considered historical fiction. Some might be a little bit more of upmarket fiction with a historical twist, or literary fiction with a historical twist, Let's just jump right in. I'm going to start with one of my favorites on this list, and that's The Unmaking of June Farrow. This is by Adrienne Young, and I would consider this more of an upmarket fiction with a historical element or historical timeline, but you can call it historical fiction if you want. Mostly it's magical realism. It's a time slip novel. It's about a woman who is caught up in this family curse, and she has to make some choices. And those choices are just mind-blowing. I loved this book so much. I remember reading it in like August of 2023 and was like, we are done here. This was, I knew instantaneously, going to be my favorite book of the year, and it absolutely was. What I love about this book is the intense connections, the family secrets. It's a murder mystery. There's some last minute twists, and it's really about choices and that kind of what if element. So it's great for a group of women, because it really explores what if I would have married that guy instead of this guy. And I think it's going to create a lot of conversation. I just love this book so much. There is a like cherry on top twist at the end that I still think about to this day. The Briar Club by Kate Quinn. So this is unlike any other Kate Quinn that I've read. It is set in the 1950s in Washington, D.C., so it's kind of a early Cold War book, and it's the story of a sentient house and several different women who were living in this boarding house, and it's told from each of their perspectives, almost like short stories within a novel. What I love about this book and what I think is going to resonate with book clubs is that there are multiple remarkably different characters, and you get to know them through these very long chapters, again, that are kind of like standalone little novellas or short stories. I love the Cold War element. I think that that is one of the least explored areas of historical fiction that, I don't know, coming up in the 80s, I remember kind of the end of the Cold War, Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall, and it really kind of resonates and has this nostalgic factor for me. So I think people my age, maybe a little older, might really gravitate to the Cold War element of this book. There's a lot of intrigue. There's also an other side of the tracks romance that I really enjoyed. It is also a murder mystery, and I love the idea of the sentient house. Like, who doesn't love that? There is some BIPOC representation, so, be aware of that. Your book club may not care about that. Some book clubs might. And one of the things that I really enjoyed the most about this, and I think this is true of any of Kate Quinn's books, is there are fierce females in this book. And I just love books that are so highly feminist like this. Also, it takes place during Thanksgiving. So it might be a great book to save for Thanksgiving or for November. Rivers Sing Me Home. Oh my gosh. This is a BIPOC authored historical fiction about a woman living in, I want to say, I can't remember which Caribbean island, but she's living on a plantation in Caribbean islands. She's enslaved, I should say, on a plantation in the Caribbean islands. And she runs away in search of her children, who were all sold off into slavery. Along the way, she reconnects with some of her kids and encounters other people impacted by slavery. It's all about mother-daughter relationships and, mother-children relationships, mother and child relationships. It's, of course, full of racial injustice. It has violence. Slavery is a key theme. And there's a huge loss and grief element to this book. So I think it would be great for a group of moms because it has that kind of element of your kids being torn away from you and what would you do. So I think it would create a lot of conversation there. It's also an Odyssey story, so it feels very much like reading one of those classic Odyssey tales, because along the way she meets all these different characters who could very well represent different elements of life. Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez is a must-read book, whether you read it with your book club or not. This takes place in the 1970s Alabama, and it's all about a young Black nurse who's kind of fresh out of nursing school. She takes a job at a local clinic and is assigned these two sisters who live in extreme poverty. They're young, I think like 11, 12, 13, somewhere in that age range. Along the way, she just really develops this very close relationship with these girls and takes them under her wing to try and protect them. Ultimately, she can't protect them. And it's just such a heartbreaking story. It's a social justice story about reproductive rights, particularly reproductive rights of Black women, women of color, during the even 1970s. That hasn't been that long ago. It is a civil rights story. There's a legal storyline here. There's a nursing storyline. So it's great for people in the legal field. It's great for people in the healthcare field. And it tells the little known or little told story of the history of eugenics in the US. And if you didn't think that was a thing, definitely you need to read this book and a couple more on this list. I think it also has a lot to say about the role of mentors in our lives, and I think it could create a lot of conversation around that. The Winter Orphans by Kirsten Beck. This is a book that I would say if your book club has read, or whether they read together or individually read and loved The Nightingale, this is a great book that kind of harkens back to that same feeling for me. This is the story of two young Jewish sisters, who are sent to this local school. I believe it was in France, and they're placed under the care of Red Cross nurses and educators. These nurses and educators are charged with keeping all of these children who are at this school safe. As the threat of Nazi occupation grows, they have to decide what to do with these kids. This resistance element to this story that I think is really great. The sister storyline is really excellent. There's a first love kind of coming of age storyline that's really great. What I love about this is not only does it have that kind of childcare and nursing element, so it would be great for nurses or teachers, it has this story of the power of advocacy, going against the grain, doing what you know is right rather than what you're being told you should or must do. And it really is impactful. It's an impactful read that I think will create a lot of discussion and dialogue. Long Gone, Come Home by Monica Chenault Kilgore. This book, you guys, it's so good. It's about a woman who is just desperate to get out of her family home, not because she has like a terrible life, but she's just ready to like grow up and get started on her way, like make her own home, marry a man, have kids. Well, she falls in love with a man who ends up not being such a great provider. And over the course of several years, we see him slip further and further into just kind of this different lifestyle than what she expected or wanted. One day he is up and gone, he vanishes, and she must go out and find him. So she leaves her kids at home with her family, goes off to the big city of Chicago in search of her man in these jazz clubs. Well, I tell you what, this book is so good. I was just blown away by this character and the writing style. This is a BIPOC authored book, so if you're wanting to diversify your reading as a book club, definitely suggest this one. It's really about complicated marriages and what we want versus what we get. And the kind of relationship between those two things. There's some episodes of assault and violence and trauma, so definitely check your trigger warnings. It's a Prohibition era story, so there's some illegal activities that go on. And really at the heart of it, it's about motherhood, marriage, and there's this really wonderful mother-daughter relationship in this story that I just loved. I think this is one that most people would enjoy. For those of you who have read and loved Ariel Lawhon's books like The Frozen River and you're looking for something else from Ariel Lawhon that would be great for book club, I highly recommend I Was Anastasia. This book is a total like mind F. I really enjoyed this book. So it's the story of a woman who believes herself to be Anastasia Romanoff, the last surviving Romanoff. It's told in this really unique format. So it's told backwards. It's got all these juicy Russian Empire historical elements. So you learn about the fall of the Russian Empire while reading this book. And it's got a lot of last minute twists. It's got a lot of elements of classism and poverty that I did not expect. And I think the twists in this one are going to either create some lovers versus haters. And I think it's going to create a lot of conversation. The House of Eve by Sadiqa Johnson. So this is about two young women who are kind of from different sides of the tracks in, I believe it was 1950s Philly or DC, I can't remember off the top of my head. Both of these young women are impacted by pregnancy. It's just such a great slice of life book. It is written by a BIPOC author and it's about two BIPOC women. The differences in their socioeconomic status did and did not impact their choices when it came to their reproductive rights and their options. It has a lot of elements of pregnancy loss, so check your trigger warnings, adoption, all those things that really highlight women's reproductive rights. It has higher education elements. Breaking through the barriers of poverty is a theme. It's also about complicated relationships, both romantic and familial. And it really focuses a lot on the early phases of marriage in one of the storylines and kind of, again, what we want, what we expect, what we get, and kind of where all that meets. The Goddess of Warsaw by Lisa Barr. I did not see this book coming. This one was so much fun. If your book club loves World War II books, but wants something a little bit different, I would highly suggest this. So this is about a woman who at the beginning of World War II is this theater star in Poland. Because she's Jewish, she ends up in the Jewish ghetto. So she uses her acting skills to really kind of turn the tables on the Nazis and her captors. She then gets involved in resistance work. There's a flash forward storyline kind of after the war. She becomes a Hollywood star. It's got this great revenge storyline in the latter half of the book that, you know what, it wasn't very realistic, but it was a lot of fun. So it's great for anybody who loves classic Hollywood stories because it has that vibe, that feel. It also has a really great love triangle, so if that interests you in your book club, definitely check it out. It has a fiercely feminist storyline about persecution and what we do to protect other women, and particularly younger women. And I loved that element of this story. Another great resistance story that I absolutely love, it's one of my all-time favorite books, is Angels of the Resistance by Noelle Salazar. It's a great book for lovers of the Nightingale or World War II fiction. If you're wanting something that you haven't yet read but will keep you flipping pages, this is it. It's a story of two young Dutch sisters who join the local resistance and kind of grow up well in advance of their years as a result of their resistance work. So it's a coming of age story, but it's a coming of age story set during like the most traumatic, turbulent times of Nazi occupied Holland. I love this sister story. The relationship between the two sisters is terrific. And, you know, there is a lot of acts of violence and a lot of taking things in your own hands that really is exciting if you like that kind of stuff. There is a grief and loss element to this book that makes it very endearing, and there's a first love element too. What the Wind Knows by Amy Harmon, another one of my all-time favorite books. This is great for any book club that wants to kind of escape the typical or traditional historical fiction eras, meaning they want something different other than World War II. This is set in the early 20th century Ireland, and it's all about Ireland's fight for independence. It is a time slip novel. It has one of the most beautiful romances that I have ever read. So if you want that historical fiction with a romance subplot, this is definitely it. What I loved about this book and what I think will resonate with a lot of people is there's a huge element of Irish culture and heritage that just I can't say enough about. It also incorporates a lot of folklore and kind of the power of stories. You know, if you know anything about the Irish culture, stories and storytelling is huge. I really enjoyed how this book portrayed the impact of civil war on families and friends and relationships, communities in general. It's so well done. The Woman with the Cure is another great book that flew way under the radar. This is all about a female scientist who helped to discover one of the things that helped to cure polio. So it's a women in STEM book. It's all about breaking through that glass ceiling, and healthcare advances. It would be great for a book club of nurses or other healthcare providers. There's an element of choosing between your career and your love life that makes it feel very modern, and I think a lot of women will relate to that. Husbands and Lovers by Beatrice Williams. This is not what I thought it was going to be, and what I mean by that is I know her for her historical fiction, and yes, there's a historical fiction element to this book, but it reads much more like a contemporary romance. And that contemporary romance was very good. It is about two sisters who are left with this piece of jewelry, this kind of weird Egyptian piece of jewelry that their mother has that they don't really understand. How did she get this? What does it mean? But they're trying to figure out how their mother came to have this piece of jewelry, what it means, what it meant to their mom, what it means to them and to their story. There's an infidelity element to the story, so be aware of that as a book club. Some people may or may not enjoy that. It is all about family secrets. Who are we, the stories that we tell, and the impact of the choices that we make. One of the things that I really enjoyed about this book is there is a kidney disease element. So it's a book that features organ transplant, and as a former organ transplant social worker, I love that. That was woven into the storyline, and it was really well done. It's also about missed opportunities as it relates to romance. So there's a second chance romance in this book that I loved. The Second Life of Mirielle West would be another great choice for a group of nurses or anyone in the healthcare field. This is the story of a woman at the kind of turn of the 20th century who is living this very lavish life out in Hollywood and develops leprosy. So she's sent to live in one of the last surviving leprosy colonies in the US, just outside of New Orleans. So for people like me from Louisiana, this is a great one, or great for a group of people from Louisiana or with that kind of connection. There's this kind of little known history of leprosy in that element of this story that I think is going to create a lot of conversation. It is also full of just kind of weird, quirky characters, including the main character who's somewhat unlikable. So I know, at least in my book club, when we have unlikable characters, it creates and fosters a lot of conversation. There's a longing for what you had versus what you have, and I think that alone, is just going to be so relatable. There is a grief and loss and a guilt element in this storyline that I think is also just very relatable and will create a lot of dialogue and discussion. The Last 12 Miles. I really enjoyed this book. It was so entertaining. This is the story of two women in early 20th century, so Prohibition era, Miami. So you got two women on different sides of the law in this book. You've got one who's a government enforcer who is trying to crack the code in terms of where is all this liquor coming from that's being funneled into the US during Prohibition. So she's on the hunt for rum runners. You've got another woman who is, in fact, herself a rum runner. So it's the story of these two women and kind of how their paths intersect. It has these two like kind of juxtaposed characters. One's glitzy and glamorous, the other is really steadfast and kind of plain Jane. Both of these women are brilliant. You know, they're very ambitious and they want what they want and they're going after it. They're not going to make any excuses. But in a sense, both are kind of held back because they're women. So it's all about breaking those barriers and kind of that, again, that glass ceiling. It is a true cat and mouse game, and it kept me flipping pages until the very last chapter. I, again, very much enjoyed this. It was highly entertaining, and I thought it was a great summertime read. In the Shadow of the Greenbrier. So this is the story of a young woman who's growing up in a Jewish family in this small community near this like really lavish hotel, and it's kind of post World War II, 1950s, and maybe even early 60s. And there's something at this hotel. There's something about this hotel that's very secretive and mysterious. In addition to that, there is this other aspect of the story about her mother and some of the choices that her mother made. And there's kind of like this family history involved. So it's a multi-layered novel that I just really enjoyed. It has tons of family secrets. Like oozes family secrets. There is an infidelity storyline, so again, be aware of that. It's also about small towns and small town secrets. There is some neurodivergence representation, although it's not explicitly stated. It's represented very well in the story, and I really appreciated that. There is definitely a coming of age element to this book and first love that, I don't know, again, I think it would be a great summertime read. All You Have to Do Is Call. Ooh, this is another reproductive rights story that I just love. So it's about a group of women living in Chicago who are somehow either directly or indirectly affiliated with the beginning of the Jane Network. And I loved this book. Loved it. It's a reproductive rights story about the early abortion movement, so be aware of that. May not resonate with all of your book club members, so read the room. At the heart of it, it is a friendship story and a story about differing values and how sometimes, even though our values different, we can still be like closely connected. It's also a book about taking a stand or choosing a side and the impact of that on friendships and relationships in your life. So really it's all about, standing up for what you believe in. And I think it will, with the right group, create a lot of conversation, a lot of positive conversation. It could devolve into a lot of negative or highly toxic conversation. So just be aware of that. A Shadow in Moscow by Catherine Ray. This was my first Catherine Ray, and I loved this book so much. So it's a mother-daughter story about World War II and early Cold War. And both of the women in this story are kind of directly or indirectly related to resistance or spy elements. I loved the twists in this story. It's full of twists. And I don't want to give anything away, so it's really hard to talk about this book without giving anything away. What I will tell you is it's about the relationship between this mother and daughter and how they differ as women, but also how they are very much the same. So there's this kind of spy, who can you trust, who do can you not trust element to this story that I think really works. And it does have also a grief and loss element that I remember being very moved by. Only the Beautiful, another just gorgeous reproductive rights story. So it has a early 20th century element as well as a World War II storyline. And it's about a young woman who is forced to make choices that she doesn't want to make because of what is at that time believed to be mental health issues that she has. Again, this features the little known history of eugenics in the US. Highly recommend for that reason. It's a book about motherhood. It has a found family element, and it has some abusive situations. So definitely do your research, check your triggers. I think that this book, everyone that I know that has read it has loved it. So I think this is one of those types of books that everyone in the book club is going to love. However, it's going to create a lot of maybe controversial conversation. Strangers in the Night. Woo! Loved this book. So this is the fictionalized account of the very real, true story of Frank Sinatra and Ava Gardner, who developed this hot, steamy relationship and ultimately married in the 50s, 40s, 50s, I can't remember exactly, but this is the fictionalized account of their love story, and it is hot, it is steamy, it is very passionate without being smutty. So if you and your book club are looking for a historical romance, this is definitely it. If you don't want like super open door, it kind of has what I like to call door ajar. So it's got some fade to black moments. It's got some, a little bit more racier elements, but it's not super, super smutty at all. Has that classic Hollywood element, so people who love classic film are going to really gravitate toward this story. It's also about two soulmates who have this really toxic relationship and how you can really love someone but not be the right person for that someone, right? The Trouble with You by Ellen Feldman. I loved this book so much. This is the story of a woman whose husband dies after he returns from World War II. She is forced to start over as a young single mom in Manhattan, entering the workforce. So it's a starting over book. It's a book about widowhood. It has these two different paths that she can take with regard to new relationships. But one of the things that is so understated in this book is the impact of the early Cold War on what's happening in the US and what's happening in this woman's life. The Disappearance of Astrid Bricard. I loved this book so much. I will read anything that Natasha Lester writes, I'll be honest. She has a way with creating these really glitzy, glamorous scenarios in her books, these just fully fleshed out character stories that are intense and complicated, but there's also always this fashion element too. So if you and your book club, if you guys are into fashion or fashion history, this is definitely one. So this is about a young woman who really needs a break, and that break could be revamping her mother's fashion line that was very, very influential and successful back in the 70s, but then her mother just disappeared. So it's the story of this young woman and the relationship that she did not have with her mother, but it's also the story of what happened to her mom. So there's this 1970s element, there's also a World War II element, and there's a 21st century element. And they all come together in this beautiful intergenerational story about motherhood, about mental health. It's so glitzy, it's so glamorous. It reminded me a lot of Daisy Jones and the Six, but it also has this kind of like Stevie Nicks element too. 1970s New York and that scene. I just loved this book so, so much. It's a little longer, so be aware of that. Our Little World. This is set in the 1980s, so it's kind of more of a domestic thriller, but it feels historical because of that 1980s nostalgia. It's set in suburban New Jersey, and it's all about these two sisters who have this kind of love to hate relationship. They're very envious of each other, and they strike up a friendship with a neighbor girl who suddenly goes missing. And it's the impact of that child's disappearance on this family, and ultimately there is a healthcare element to this story as well. It's great for a group of nurses. It's a great sister story. Again, it has that nostalgia from the 80s that I loved. There's a mystery element. It's a small town, so there's that small town living and suburban living that I think is just going to create a lot of nostalgic conversation. Lastly, The Good Left Undone. I really enjoyed this book. This is a book about multiple generations of Tuscan women. It's also a World War II story. It's about family secrets. It's just about passionate first love and undying love and the things that we do to protect our family, the things that we do to ensure the future or a better future for our family or our children. There's a lot of Italian culture and heritage in this book that I think anyone who has any interest in Italy or Italian heritage would love. It's a matriarch story, so it's about strong females, and I think it's gonna really create a lot of conversation, and it flew way under the radar. Nobody talks about this book, and it's really one of my favorite historical fictions. It's got this really beautiful, beautiful love story between an Italian woman and an Irish man. Just love this book. Loved it. I'm really curious, have you read any of these books? Would you agree with me that they'd be great book club books? I love the idea of themes and kind of what makes a good book club book. I'm really starting to dig into this. I have my own online book club. I also belong to an in real life book club. So I want to hear from you. What do you think makes a good book club book? And again, do you agree with any of these? Which books would you add to this list that are great book club books for historical fiction lovers?